Hey, the bunny starts to look very, very sad. And if we even get the ears down, and once again, if we keep adding the different combinations of the elements, we can portray a much different feeling. And if the moment is getting more intense, we can get even more worried with the character is breathing very heavily, and then hi. Let's cover character control with a Midi controller. We did a video before, but this one will be more advanced and in-depth. We added one whole controller with a lot of sliders. We'll cover how we can use that to control the character arms very nicely. We have knobs for controlling right arm and left arm, and we go from the shoulder, elbow, and wrist. You can also see that the wrist needs to be flipped, so we have that to snap to the proper position, so our arm is always looks appropriately. At the moment, you need to do quite a lot of jiggling around to have this done, but we can actually automate a lot of those actions by combining multiple sliders into one. So we can control both wrist, elbow, and shoulder with one slider, and we can rig pose to pose as we want to see it, and we can combine it. For example, you can see those two sliders can affect the hand, and we can have this default position where we will snap from to have all the character movement very smooth, or at least smooth enough. And this also makes it easier to combine with something like that, because when it comes to controlling the character, it's much easier to do 2 things at a time basically than 5 things at a time. But it's still useful to have this granular control, because at a time we want to have this sort of conversation where the bunny just gonna do something, and we just want to say like, hey, we want to continue to have the character animated and just doing something so it doesn't look too still. Or for example, we may go for some sort of a pose where we pretend that we want to grab the pistol, for example, or we want to get into something like let's say this and that and this, and let's align the second arm as well and flip it, and there, and we can have a little bit of a dance this way. We can also control the ears by changing both gravity and wind direction. We can control character position on the x-axis. We can control character position on the y-axis. As we covered, if we want some sort of a default position for our arms, we have the slider to choose from. We can also position our character much more quickly on a screen, so these 2 buttons pretty much teleport. And when the button is pressed, because the button is technically a slider in this case, when it's pressed, the slider is full on and the character scale is changing. And when we let it go, the character snaps to the certain place. And we rigged 2 of those buttons just to have this option of have different angles and play around with the bunny just having fun, like do. And the ears are really helping when it comes to the character movement and in generally to add a little bit of a more fun when it comes to the character. One more thing that we can control is the size, in case we want to travel around, so it shows the different things, or integrate character into the scene itself, which, well, would not work too great without a shadow, but sometimes quite possible. We can do it with a slider, or if we want to have the full-on representation where we can see mostly the head, we can accommodate this as well, and we can use a quick snapping to go in the back and reposition ourselves. We can also rotate the character, which is not useful a lot of times, but if you want to do something like that, when the character just sits in a corner and does not cover too much of the screen, it can be quite useful to do. For the arm movements, it's very fun to play with, but we will need to find some more curves that's gonna address quite specific issues with the character. So I do see clearly that, like, saying hi to people or doing something. Oh, this one is also exact. Or doing something like that, where it's like, hey, da 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 da, hey, like celebration, or like hello people, or just like in generally some sort of a like, oh yeah 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 yeah. So we can go ahead and play with that much more than usual, because we have those controls, and we will see what sort of a curve we want to achieve all desired effects. Let's increase character a little bit so I can show the next part, because these buttons and these buttons are also doing things now. Let's get the arms to the neutral position, and now let's see the... First of all, we can control the eyes, and we can trigger different emotions based on just how we cover the eyes. So this is just part of the blinking, but if we just keep it on, and it kind of looks like a bunny is getting more tired, and we can get progressively basically worse and worse with that as we are cover more and more eyes. And we can also do it from the front, which immediately produce a much different effect. We can also trigger the additional notches near the nose to exaggerate this effect even more. And if we flip the mouse from the happy one to the sad one, that will even further... Oh, I rigged the wrong button, but if we select the sad mouse, in addition to all that, the bunny starts to look very, very sad. And if we even get the ears down, it will be completely different character with a completely different mood now. In addition to the notches for the bottom of the eyes, we can also change the eyebrows, because eyebrows also quite a bit affect our mood. This is more of a dedicated mode where it's like, we don't know what to do, and we are hunting to something. And you can see it especially near the bunny middle of the head. There is this intensity, added intensity, because they are kind of pushed together. And we can even further exaggerate this effect with even the bigger eyebrows that are that makes character very intense. And once again, if we keep adding the different combinations of the elements, we can portray a much different feeling, right? So last time it was more of a tired because of that, but now when we are keeping it like this, it's more of a worried situation, right? And if we are getting the different eyebrows, it actually affects things every time. So as we are presenting, we can swap it live and just play with whatever we have. And what is nice here is that our character is actually respond to us live. So in case we want to go ahead and basically press this button, right now you can see that the arms are just crossed, but this is basically a different arms that I can control with my mouse as opposed to with my character controller. So it's more classical control with inside the character animator that we can use, and we can flip back and forth. And these arms would be much more convenient for pre-rigging animations that will be triggered by the other buttons in case we want to have something pre-compiled basically. And these guys are very useful to have something live, so in case we want to have our hand and just say hi to people, or make some pose on a fly, or just get general adjustments while we're speaking, just to have this impressions that character is actually alive and continue to do something and leave after we control it, then it's also a possible situation. However, like more practice is gonna be required, because that's a lot of buttons that we'll need to figure out, and the overall experience changed much based on what is currently out there with a character. But it's definitely interesting to play with, and I do like this versatility of the controls that allow to us. Also, this is allow us quite interesting scalability in the future when it comes to automating the process of animating the character. At this moment, Character Animator does not have the looping animations that I'm aware of, but we do have this Midi controller. So if we imagine that we taking our arm and going back and forth, at this moment we have the problem of the big finger that is outside, supposed to be on a up, and as we are flipping it here, now we need to press this button basically to flip the arm. But the thing is, we do have the logic that understands that here is the value of the controller, and this is a MIDI controller, so I think we can read this value. And I'm thinking, if we read the value of the controller that is less than that, can we trigger something in Windows that will send the key press to the Character Animator? Because I checked it with the automation, and we can actually use, for example, Auto AT to use the control send command, and we can have completely different window open and send input inside the Character Animator window. So I'm thinking, if we can figure out the way to just grab the value of the controller and react on it, this would be massive, because we would be able to replace the need of waiting for Adobe team to make the replayable cycles, because we can just can make it happen. And this would be the next part that we'll be working on when it comes to working with a MIDI controller. So it's really a much more responsive character now, and it's much easier to play with. And the idea for broadcasting in general is just simplify your process, make sure that everything that needs to happen can happen instantly live, and you don't have to bug with it too much. At this moment, it's a lot of controls, but I don't have to concentrate on them too much unless I need to do specific things. I think it's much more important just to have a little bit of a movement, even if we just doing something like that, when it comes to just like, hey, let's make sure that the character is just not completely still, and just continue to do something, and we can have a little bit of a creative control over that, especially like saying hello to people. You can say like that, you can say hello to some people like that, you can say hello to some people like that, and this may portray the different emotions that you experience as well. And we will keep adding things like crying animations, etc. But even now, our character can react to things differently. Let's say we want our character to be more nervous. You can see at the moment the character, if you concentrate on the torso, is breathing. But we can press this button on the bottom right, and the character is going to be breathing much faster, because the moment is getting intense, right? And if the moment is getting more intense, we can get even more worried, and we can start playing with like, hey, oh my gosh, what is going on? Or we can even get tired. So you can see a lot of things can definitely happen. So we can be, for example, in this tired mode, and then something intense happens in a game, for example, and we can say like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So the eyes are suddenly open, we're still worried, the character he's breathing very heavily, and then he just stops breathing at all and stops by the breathing in. And this is another button that we have, and we will be thinking what we can do with other, and we will be making as responsive as the character as possible, so it's very easy and out of our way, so we can do something else and basically play around with the different knobs a little bit. And even that is gonna be very representative. It's definitely fun to play with, and I am happy with how character looks at the moment. And I think the sliders are actually one of the key themes to make it work properly for the live broadcasting. So sliders are awesome. If you're looking for the ways to control your characters, find something like this where you can have a lot of sliders. This particular one is a worldwide brand, which is not ideal. For example, this and that sends the same MIDI signal, but it's really unique and have a lot of sliders. So if you can find something like this, I highly recommend you that. Hey, hope that was helpful for you. And cheers. Have a best day.